Welcome to the FIH Hockey Pro League show. Today we will chat about the weekend's matches between India and Germany women before switching our focus to the role of the modern hockey coach and getting some top tips from two of the hockey coaching greats in the game today. So just to quickly introduce those guys, we've got Shea McAleese from New Zealand, former Black Sticks player and our assistant coach to the New Zealand women's team. Good evening to you actually, Shea.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Sarah.
Absolute pleasure. And we're joined by Adrian Locke, the national coach to the Spanish women's team. Hi, Adi, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for having me back on again. Nice to be here again.
It's always a pleasure. So if we take a look first at the two matches we saw. In the first match, we saw India take a quick lead through Navneet, nullified almost instantly by Lotta Sippel. At that point, there was every chance that the game was going to lead to another high-scoring game, and we'd seen Adie's team in action a couple of weeks previous where there had been a very high-scoring game. But in fact, there were no further goals, and we went to shootout, which Germany eventually won. The German side turned up, they were a young side. There were 65 caps between the entire squad, and it's the basis of the team for the Junior World Cup. So I thought, taking all that in mind, Shea, if we come to you first, what was your take on that first match from a German perspective?
Yeah, I was super impressed. I think anytime you've got sort of a new group coming through, and particularly with minimal experience and playing in an environment such as India, it is a hard place to tour to first and foremost. Like pretty daunting sort of venue out of all the venues in world hockey. It's probably one of the more special ones, and sometimes the occasion can sort of get to you. But I was really impressed with how the German team went, particularly after going down a goal in the fourth minute, and then being able to rebound and score basically a minute or so after that game. But probably the highlight for me was just how well they played throughout the game. India come with a lot of speed, a lot of individual skill, and I thought the German side defended their circle really, really well. So the Indian team, their opportunities and chances were sort of scratchy chances. They weren't really, really clear-cut opportunities. And then Germany, they ticked away, and they could have actually almost won the game towards the end of it in regular time. And obviously the shootouts were a little bit messy from both sides, but Germany managed to win it in the end. But just generally impressed, and there was a couple of real key sort of standout players for me. One of them even reminded me of a little bit of Stacey Mickelson from here in New Zealand, just with how quick and how well she could carry the ball. So it was a good start for them, and I think definitely a few of those players will be able to be picked up into the senior squad, and it will show some definite threats for how they're going to go at the Junior World Cup. And I think they're sort of putting the rest of the Junior World Cup teams on notice a little bit with how they went in those two games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I thought the German in that first match, their management, particularly in the third quarter, when India really began to pile on the pressure, I thought Germany really dug deep and showed a lot of maturity in the way that they played that match. Adi, what were your thoughts on the German team before we move to the Indian side?
Yeah, again, I agree with Shea. I mean, it's a really good, strong under-21 team. They're obviously going to compete seriously at the under-21 World Cup. And it's one of the stronger teams, having seen the other European teams, under-21 teams. They're definitely up there, one of the strongest teams in Europe. So I think they're going to compete well. And like Shea said, I think sometimes going to India, the challenge is as much everything that's around the game as the game itself. Getting there, all your kind of vaccinations, everything like that you need to do, watching your diet when they're watching you eat, what you drink, what you don't drink. The heat and humidity is quite... when we were there, it's about 32, 33, 34 degrees and 70% humidity upwards. So, I mean, it's uncomfortable, not the extreme that Tokyo was, but it's still uncomfortable, and that it all fatigues you, the travel, it all just fatigues you. So it's as much as controlling that environment as the game itself. And like Shea said, I thought Germany were good, especially at the beginning of the game. In possession, I thought they moved the ball around well. I thought they're clearly strong individually, and they got some fast players. I also picked out the same. I imagine it's the same player, the 28, the Fletschutz, on the right-hand side, who was again in both games. So I thought she was a player that makes a difference running with the ball. I hadn't thought the Stacey Mickelson comparison, but thinking about it, it's very much that kind of style. Obviously, she's had a little bit more experience, because I think she was at the Olympics as well, so she's had a little bit more experience with the senior team. But I thought they were strong. I thought they got numbers back in defence, which is where India really struggled, because India kind of attacked down the sidelines most of the time, and Germany accumulated a lot of defenders in their 22 outside the D. So it made it really difficult for India to get into the D. And when India did get into the D, Germany had a lot of players around the ball. So I thought they were good like that, and they slowed the play down, and they got a lot of numbers in defence. So that made them strong in defence to be able to kind of launch their attacks. And as the game went on, what did happen noticeably for Germany is that they did tire, which is partly possibly from their preparation, possibly coming out of indoor, possibly from the journey and the heat and everything. And so they did lose more of the possession and make more mistakes in the decision making and outletting. But again, the maturity that they showed to keep their heads reasonably clear and keep defending and to keep themselves in the game, and they were always going to get counter attacks anyway. So it kept them in the game. But it was an impressive performance for especially a young team.
Yeah, and thanks for supplying us with yet a Flirtion's name, because I think Shea had probably forgotten it, and I was scrabbling away for it as well. But that's the new Stacey Mickelson on the side. I also thought Marley Wickman was very good in the German goal as well. I thought she had a really good game, and Sarah Strauss I thought was also quite impressive up front. Turning our attention to the Indian side, if we come to you first, Adie, simply because you played them a couple of weeks ago. From where I was sitting, they didn't look as intense in their attack as I thought they were against your side. But I don't know what your feelings were on that Indian performance in the first match.
I thought it was looking purely on performance. Obviously, having studied them before we played them, having played against them and studied while we're playing them, and then seeing them afterwards, it's easier to situate kind of where they're going. It's the reason. Well, they've got some young players there, and Jannika's kind of starting with the team, so you can. I think it was clear to see the evolution of where they're trying to go. So I thought that they grew through the two games, and they had more clarity of what they wanted to do. I felt that in possession, they worked the ball better than they had done against us, possibly. I felt that there's some routines that they do the same anyway, but their attacking did seem to be quite a lot down the sidelines. And they looked at quick one-on-ones, the 2-on-1s, they looked for quick short passes down the sideline. But it meant that they struggled to get into the D with a lot of space. Their main attack against us, for me, was from turnover, from quick play, from turnover possession, and when we lost the ball, they attacked quickly. And I think that still will be a strong point for them, because it's when they attack into space, and when they have space, they're very dangerous because of the one-on-one skills and the kind of quick 2-on-1s, and they can get into D with a little bit of space. I think against Germany, because they attacked down the sidelines, it was more difficult for them to create clear-cut opportunities because they get into the 22, and there was a lot of German players there, and they didn't get to the D soon enough. That was my kind of opinion. I thought they changed that in the second game, which we can come on to afterwards. Yeah. And I thought they were starting to coordinate better their press as well. I thought against us, their press was intermittent. Sometimes they caused us problems, and sometimes they didn't. And I think against Germany, again, it progressed through the two games, but they worked out how to press a little bit high and put a bit more pressure on the German back line without leaving so much space between the lines. Because with the pincer kind of press that they do, with their forwards looking to come around the outside, so the centre backs, they obviously want the play to come inside. But Germany, Germany, they're a very tactical team at any age group, and they know how to move the ball around. I always think it's one of the best teams in the world in terms of moving the ball around the pitch and the kind of chess play, which I guess comes a little bit from their indoor season. Can work around presses quite easily sometimes. And I thought India had progressed in that aspect in terms that they coordinated better their press. They kept their lines closer together, so it's more difficult for Germany to press them. And again, as Germany tied over the weekend, then the Indian press became more and more effective, and they recovered more and more possession higher up the pitch, and were able to counterattack. Sometimes that was also counter. What's the word? Counter, not useful.
Yes, I was going to say counterintuitive, but it's not really.
It was counterproductive sometimes, because they pressed high, but Germany never got their team out, and so they were just defending. The whole team was at the back because they couldn't get out at any stage anyway. And so sometimes they kind of India did go back to half court just to get the German team out to get a bit of their back line to get a little bit more space to attack as well. But I thought it was a clear progression of India over from our games and into these Germany games, and it's moving forwards, which is obviously what Janica, I imagine, is wanting to do. I think coaches at this stage of the season are a lot more focused on performance and developing the style of play and developing the play than the results, which sometimes just come from individual plays. And obviously you want the better performance to create more individual plays that then make the difference. But I thought it was a good progression, or a clear progression.
I mean, Janica had said before the match that she really wanted to concentrate on defensive qualities within the squad, and they obviously answered that. What was your take, Shea? We'll come on to the shootout at the end, but what was your take on the actual first game from the Indian perspective?
Yeah. So much to 80 as well. I think the main threats from India are actually from space. So I actually thought, generally it came from midfield turnover, or even sort of in the defensive 50 when they could actually turn the ball over, and then you could see that when they've got space, when they've got they're looking for that clear one-on-one, they would actually be willing to carry the ball over 30, 40 meters or create two-on-ones where possible. Because Germany tend to, like Adi said, hold the ball particularly well, they're generally pretty well structured to set up for counter-attack as well. So then that limited India's opportunity basically to get into the circle. So what I found is that they probably struggled to get into the circle comfortably. And India looked like they needed a bit more, they wanted to play with a bit more space and more freedom. And if they did get into the circle, then the second German defender was able to get there. I thought they could have played a little bit more combination play because of the way that Germany were trying to rush sort of defense and defend outside the circle, that if they did actually look a little bit beyond, and we're only talking about 4 or 5 meters here, they could have actually found that second player a little bit better, who was in better position to actually shoot. And then probably the only other thing was just more of a skill work on, is that they, in the circle, they tend to take their stick off the ball a lot. They receive the ball and then they take this big wind up and then try to shoot. And then the Germany defensive players were picking their pocket. And then just from a defensive point of view, I think watching them compared to other teams, they struggled a little bit with the way Germany used their body. And German, typically, they use their body a lot when they play, on the receives, on their rolls, on their ability to sort of enter into the circle, and they struggled a little bit with that. Whereas I think tactically they shifted that a little bit in the second game, which we'll get onto obviously pretty shortly as well.
Yeah. One question I was going to ask you both as coaches, in the last few matches, particularly the women's matches we've watched, we've seen a lot of use of the aerial ball, and I don't think a single aerial ball was thrown in either of these two matches. Is that just the style of these two teams, or was it, what would have contributed to that? Because we have seen India throw aerials quite a lot, haven't we? I don't know, Shea, if you've got any comment on that.
Yeah, I didn't see it so much from India. I saw I think it was Cruz, the defensive player on the left for Germany. She threw a few, but I think her confidence was also a little bit knocked because she threw a couple of poor ones and a couple of like diddly dobblers that just sort of ran along the ground. So potentially that probably didn't throw as many in the second game as the first. But as I said, it is something that's becoming more prevalent in women's hockey, and I think it will become more prevalent going forward as well. And I think it will be something we'll see a lot at the World Cup. That's been one of the massive advancements of the women's game, and I think it will sort of start to dictate around how teams press. And I know that's big in the men's game, because the aerial ball can be played from anywhere, and then particularly the men's game starting to utilize it into the circle as an offensive play as well. So I'm pretty excited to see the women's game start to develop that as well, and when you can see some pretty spectacular goals coming straight from an overhead.
Yeah, are we expecting to see some from the New Zealand team then?
Yeah. It was a strength of mine, so I've got to try and teach the girls how to do it as well.
Adi, because there's a lot of players in your team who throw great aerials, aren't there?
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to add it into our game. I think as a coach, you want to see where the game's going and see how the game's evolving. And like we've said, I think it's been an important part of the men's game. It's become a more prevalent, it's had a more varied usage in the men's game as well, from just the long aerial to the short aerials into the second line, or kind of they kind of dropped in forward or in between the lines as the men's game has changed and gone from man-to-man marking into a mixture of man-to-man marking and zonal defence. I think with the women's game, obviously the long aerials aren't so long, and that makes a big difference. The teams that have that long aerial can force the other team to open up a little bit, have an advantage. But I think it's a skill that during this Olympic cycle will come more fundamental in the women's game as well. And I mentioned you can see you can see it's being introduced, and you see how in the Belgium-Holland games it's used, but how Belgium uses it. Obviously we use it quite a lot. I think India used it quite a lot against China, maybe a little bit less so against us and against Germany. But again, it depends on the moment. India use their flicks and their long balls at specific moments in the game, but they have looked for flicks into into the pivot even, but also into the second line of or the third line of players. Maybe just not so commonly. I'm also finding that it's I think there's a lot of clarity about the way it could be used and umpired at the Olympics. And I think the number of meetings we had with the umpires managers before the Olympics brought a lot of clarity to how to use it. And personally, I'm finding at the moment, there's a little bit less clarity about when we can use it, when not to use it. And it's a little bit more random which way the free hit's going to go when the ball's coming down. So it's something that personally I'm going to look to clarify this week a little bit with the main umpire man, and send the clips and get a little bit of feedback, because I'm feeling that teams are trying to use it more, but I don't feel that there's clarity about when it can be used and when it can't be used. And
you need that confidence. I mean, if you're going to throw something, if you're going to use that tactic, you need the confidence that you understood it, but actually it's going to be accepted within the game as well. That's really important, isn't it? Exactly. Otherwise, you're turning over a possession.
Yeah, exactly. It's fundamental to know how it's going to be blown, and then how then to use it, and how then to train to use it, and how to teach the team and guide the team in terms of that feedback from the umpires. It's fundamental in terms of they knowing how to use it and when to use it.
Yeah.
And I think that clarity, like Shea said, of using the aerial ball into the deep is something that I think will become more used in this cycle, men's and women's. But again, that usage was because there's a lot of clarity about what could be done into the D and what the defender had to do and where the attacker needed to be in order to be able to be allowed to receive the ball. But I'm sure it's going to become a dominant factor in the Olympic cycle in international hockey.
It's also why these matches are so important. You know, good chance to actually test it out and see what can and can't be done, and and move on from there. Moving to the second game, just before we talk about the two performances, I just wanted to ask you from a technical point of view, the German penalty corner routine, they use a running injection, which is very different, isn't it, to what a lot of teams are doing. What's the benefit of that? Shea, if I just come to you on that one, is it just to get more power? Yeah,
it's more power, and I think also we've gone through this a little bit. Sometimes when you're static and you can kind of hold the ball and the players can't get a read on you, I also think it is a little bit of a challenge for the first runner to get a read on a running pull out, because your feet both plant and then your stick addresses the ball slightly after your feet, and then that's where you can sometimes catch out the run as well. And you saw that with one of the Indian corners that they broke on that. So sometimes they're even slightly more delayed jumping out of the goal because they don't want to break. But definitely I'd put more of it down to adding a bit of power, particularly if you've got accuracy, which the German girl definitely did. Then you can rip the ball out. You can give your players at the top of the circle as much time as you can. Your penalty corner routine, whichever it's going to be, whether it's direct or variations, you're going to give yourself more time to execute, and that's what can be the difference between scoring or not.
Germany did score through that. They took the lead, closed the first half through a penalty corner, and then India piled on the pressure in the third quarter before they were rewarded with the goal, a slightly bundled in goal. I think it knocked around the circle and eventually it just got knocked over the line. But if we come to you first, Shea, your thoughts on that second game? Did you spot any major changes for either team? Did you see any big improvements from one performance to the next, or was it actually more a case of two teams fine-tuning things?
Yeah, probably actually what Adi said, where India did make some subtle changes. So the biggest difference I saw from game one to game two with India in particular was the way they pressed. They pressed a lot better, particularly in the first half. I found Germany were actually struggling to get out of their defensive 50, and there was a lot more turnover from India created from their press. Probably the limitation to that was when they did break their press, there was space for Germany to attack, and that was probably the biggest difference, is that as much as they were creating things from turnover, they probably didn't create as much in the goal mouth as what you would want from that subtle change in press, because then also when you look at the game, as much as probably India, you felt that they were potentially a little bit more dominant. If you look at the chances where, Germany hit the post on a stroke, they scored from a corner. The goal that was bundled in should never be a goal. Just get the ball in your stick, get rid of it. Don't hang onto it in front of your goal. And then they still had a couple of chances late, and then actually ended up dominating the majority of the stats bar circle penetration. So I think Germany will definitely be the happier of the two teams out of that weekend, from bringing in the young team, competing really, really well across the two games. But as you say, I think, and AD's alluded to this as well, is that teams are building, and I think India's building under Yannicka as well, and new team blooding in different players, and not all players played game 1 to game 2, so there will always be some subtle ups and downs. But it was good to watch. I really enjoyed watching both games sort of back and forward, and a bit of a sort of a boxing match kind of couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end of that, I was just thinking they did look like two teams who had absolutely slugged the sort of bejesus out of each other. They really did look quite tired. One big improvement, obviously, was India's shootout performance between the first match and the second. AD, there was quite a difference in the two performances there, weren't there?
Yeah, I think shootouts a lot of the time, there's obviously the technical aspect of it, but it's a very big mental aspect as well. And I thought the Indians came out, both attacking players and Savita in the goal, with a lot more it seemed just like they had more an attitude that they wanted to take the destiny into their own hands and really take the shootouts by the scruff of the neck, if you like. I thought Savita in goal was a lot more aggressive. She closed down the space better to the German players and was very, very quick on her feet, very agile. And then when it came to the time where the Germans wanted to shoot, she had a really good balance to be able to make the final stop. And I thought the players coming in, again, were confident and went in with confidence that they looked like they were going to score. Sometimes you can go into a shootout competition and you have the same plan. You can see, well, I'll do this and see how it goes, and then it reacts, or really kind of go in and trying to make that shootout work and move the keeper where you want to move the keeper to create the space to be able to score. And I thought the Indians were good that way. And on the other hand, I thought the Germans were the other way around.
Yes.
I thought the German keeper was lost her balance a lot. Her main problem was as she goes up to the penalty spot and starts going backwards to trying to maintain distance, she lost her balance a lot of the time, and so she was kind of falling backwards. So when the Indians moved the ball, she kind of fell onto her bum and wasn't really able to do what she was able to in the first game with a little more poise and posture. And again, the German players kind of went in a little bit, and I think because Savita was good and so active and quick on her feet, then the Germans kind of panicked a little bit and forced the play at the end of the shootouts, or the end of their shootout, not the end of the competition, rather the end of, they go in, they move the keeper, they try and go into the space, but the keepers covered that space, and then they kind of panicked a little bit at that part of the shootout maybe. So I thought as a kind of a mental change, especially from the first shootouts to the second.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I felt for most of those two matches, as a very, very young side, Germany showed remarkable composure in most situations. Real hats off to them. That's going to be great for them going into the Junior World Cup. And Shea said, of the two teams, probably Germany are going to go away the happier of the two teams from these results. But if you were Yannicka now, AD, what would you be looking on as the real positives from those two performances, and what would you be looking to improve? Just a couple of points on either side there.
No, I mean, if I was Yannicka, I'd go away from the games happy as well. I think it's, like I said, it's been a clear evolution of the team. You think this is the team that spent before the Olympics a year and a half without playing any international hockey, without playing any games at all, and we're still recovering from COVID in that sense, that the players don't have that experience. They've lost a year and a half's worth of experience. So a young player, they haven't played international hockey for.
This is not making Shea feel great, by the way.
They've got Australia. I mean, what do you need? You're going to play somebody.
Sorry,
and so I think she will have seen the evolution of the team. She will have obviously seen individual players. I think the things that she worked on, she talked, I think, at halftime about the better possession. And I thought the possession in that second game was better. I thought they attacked in the same way, but when they got to 25, they looked to get to the D quicker. So they had a little bit more space to create better opportunities or more clear-cut kind of situations, if you like, in the D. And then it's obviously something like Shea said, the things that you'll work on. But normally you set out your stall of, this is the things I want to work on during this phase. And then there'll be another phase you'll work on different things, I guess. She'll be working on certain aspects of play, and from what she said, which doesn't necessarily mean that's what's happening, but those aspects were better, and the press was a lot better. The attacking play was better. So I think she'll go away happy with the evolution and the experience that all these games are creating, because each game has its own characteristics, its own situations, its own context, and that's what gives players the experience of competing at this level, competing in games that end up 1-1. Their maximum tension, maximum amount of tension, maximum excitement. How do you manage this last bit of the game? Do we go for the win? Do we make sure we don't lose? Do we go for the shootout? They're experiences that then will be useful in the competitions that India's got. And India's got a lot of competitions this year. I mean, they've got the World Cup, they've got the Asian Games, which are qualifying for the Olympics, plus the Commonwealth Games. I mean, they've got a lot of competitions with a lot riding on those, the big competitions. So it's definitely looking to develop as best as possible at this stage, and I think she'll go happy.
Brilliant. As a coach, Shea, you've been watching these matches, and obviously you're now going to be prepping your New Zealand team for both the Commonwealth Games and the World Cup. As a coach, how do you use this information now? And this is sort of a bit of info for the coaches out there who are listening in. But you've watched the games, you're making your notes, you're sort of making your own feedback. But how do you now disseminate it to your players? And you've got about 30 seconds to explain that to me.
Yeah. So first and foremost, it's I go for an 80-20 split. So 80% is sole focus on our team, because I think you've got to always focus on your team first before focusing on the opposition. But when trying to go through an opposition, will be similar, talking to what AD's talked about, where their domination is going to come from, around what areas of the field they're going to try and primarily attack, and how they're going to use those attacks, how they're going to outlet the ball from the defensive 50, what sort of press would be really effective for us within our, obviously, 80% of what we normally would do. So if a player's weaker in a certain aspect, or a team's weaker in a certain aspect, we could press them this way to get some reward. And then definitely you'll go into the crux of where you're going to win and lose a game. So how do we need to defend our circle? How do we need to attack our circle? And then what you're going to do in PCA and PCD. That's how I would pretty much frame it up, and try and keep it as simple as you can, because when you're messaging simple to your team, when they go out onto the pitch, they're going to take out a simple message and put that into practice.
Yeah, so it's not overloading the players with info, and as you say, you're concentrating on your own game. Adi, when you're working with your team and you're giving this information to them, is it a case of sitting the squad down and chatting to them, Ted Lasso style, or do you have small groups? Do you have group leaders who you speak to, who then speak to the group? How does it work?
I think it's just through the season, through the training sessions, we try and relate everything we train to the game match play. So when we do our video sessions, we try and relate video from training sessions with video from the game, so we see where we're developing, why what we're training is relevant to gameplay, and where the context of the training sessions kind of can be applied into the game, and then focus on little bits at a time, not to, like Shea said, not to do too much at the same time. Also, I feel that there's still a huge amount of work we do on individual basics. The basics of passing, receiving, is still more important than anything else, because other gameplay situations, tactics, whatever, all come down to the ability to pass and receive the ball, and how to do that, and how to defend one-on-ones, and how to defend as a team. So I mean, there's a lot of work we still do on basics, and it's easy to overcomplicate things in that way as well, and a lot of the time it's a lot more simple than that. And so then we use the games, especially with it depends on the model, obviously, that you've got and the time you have with the players, but we are spending a lot of time on that. And then we use the matches that we've got this year, and because they're competitive matches with the Pro League, then we're using that to apply kind of tactics and the tactical way of how we're going to implement our kind of our style of play, if you like. So we're working on those two aspects kind of separately, and it's something new for us as well. And we're playing a little bit differently. We're playing a way which I've never done before. I don't have all the solutions. So also tactically, we're working on it as a team in that I don't have the answers of how we're going to play tactically, because we're kind of learning as we go. So it's kind of quite interesting as well. So we're actually,
it's exciting.
At the moment. It's just different at the moment, and with the team we've got at the moment, and then some of the new coaches coming in as well. It's a question again. There's new ideas. Obviously, some of the time, personally, because I've been here for a long time, I think it could get pretty tedious if I just talk a lot, which I'm told I do. So it's nice to get other people. That's why Shea only had 30 seconds. So it's nice for them to listen to other voices, and then for me as well to listen and to develop how I am as a coach, which is basically how I developed over the years with the different coaches and members of staff that I had and learned from them, and that's basically how I form or develop myself as a coach. So it's interesting time, and that's a little bit how we work it.
Brilliant. So the message time has caught up with us. The messages from you two are be open to ideas, be open to listen to new things, but at the very, very basis of it all, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Great insight from you both. Thank you very, very much for that. Adrian, you're back in action against Germany next weekend, as you said, or next week anyway. So good luck with that game. Shea, have a great few weeks in your intensive build-up. We're going to finish the show with a look back at the highlights from the two matches, but thank you both very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So 8 seconds from the whistle. Here she goes. Engages the goalkeeper and fires it straight into the body, and that's, well, not a great start. So Salima for India. Engages the goalkeeper and rolls round her. First blood for India. Turns her back on the goalkeeper, rolls around her, misses with the first shot, and misses and is timed out. Now India, forward again. Held up by the goalkeeper, but no chance. Germany need this one. Again, getting the goalkeeper moving. She needs to be quick. She's too slow, timed out. Well, this is for the ball game. Oh, it doesn't come any better than that. What a difference a day makes. And India take the bonus point after a drawn game here.